Hey there, it's Mitch here. And before we get into today's episode, our spring membership drive has officially sprung, and we've got one heck of a giveaway. When you make a donation in any amount to Vermont Public by March 16th, you'll be entered to win a new roof valued up to $15,000, thanks to Vermont Construction Company. Your support makes everything we do possible. Make a gift today so we can keep bringing you the trustworthy, reliable news you count on day in and day out. To make your gift, head to vermontpublic.org/donate. And thanks. From Vermont Public, this is The Frequency. I'm Mitch Wertlieb. It's Saturday, March 16th, which means you're listening to a special weekend edition of the podcast featuring the Capitol Recap. Democratic House lawmakers want some $250 million added to next year's state budget to cover initiatives they've prioritized. We'll discuss the tax implications and more after this.
The Frequency is supported by MVP Healthcare, offering Medicare Advantage plans made for Vermont and guided by doctors. In partnership with the UVM Health Network. Info at uvmhealthadvantage.com.
When Republican Governor Phil Scott delivered his budget address in January, he predicted Democratic lawmakers would be most concerned about the things that did not make it into his spending plan. Turns out, he was right. House lawmakers have identified more than $250 million worth of initiatives they want to add to next year's state budget. And soon, they'll have to make a choice. Throw those priorities by the wayside and live within the current state revenue forecast or raise taxes so they can cover the additional spending. In this week's edition of the Capitol Recap, reporter Pete Hirschfeld is here to talk about Democrats' spending priorities and how they might go about paying for them. Hey, Pete.
Hello, Mitch.
So, Pete, $250 million, obviously a lot of money. What sorts of line items are Democrats hoping to include in next year's state budget?
Housing is a big one. The federal pandemic aid that the legislature has used to fund affordable housing projects over the past few years, it's all but dried up. But a lot of lawmakers say if Vermont wants to continue to make progress on new construction, government is going to have to fuel that growth, and it's going to have to fuel that growth with taxpayer dollars, Vermonters' taxpayer dollars. And House lawmakers are asking for an additional $150 million or so to maintain that momentum. Lawmakers want $27 million to maintain that emergency motel housing program for unsheltered Vermonters that we hear so much about. They want to keep that going into next year. There's $11 million for community mental health organizations. There's $7 million, Mitch, for what are known as enhanced residential care programs. These are small community-based nursing homes, basically nursing homes for older, low-income Vermonters who have no other housing or care options. Wolcott Representative Dan Noyes says a lot of these programs are on the verge of going insolvent, and he's convinced that they're going to go under if lawmakers don't come up with additional funding.
Where are people going to go if we don't have the facilities?
Some of the budget asks from lawmakers, they're aspirational, like almost wish list stuff. And House budget writers are not going to accommodate $250 million in additional spending. But there are line items that lawmakers argue are critically important. And the argument from people like Dan Noyes is that really bad things are going to happen to really vulnerable individuals if state government doesn't step in with additional funding.
Well, the bottom line, Pete, is that as it stands now, there just won't be enough revenue coming in next year to pay for all the things Democrats want to do. If they do want to move forward with these priorities, they're going to have to raise taxes on Vermonters, as you said. Do you have a sense of which direction lawmakers are leaning?
Most of the Democratic House legislators that I've talked to are cemented in their belief that Vermont needs to raise revenues next year. South Burlington Representative Martin Lalonde is the chair of the House Judiciary Committee. His committee wants budget writers to add an additional $15 million or so to fund new positions in the criminal justice system. Lalonde says the public safety issues that many communities in Vermont face right now are the result of courts' inability to process cases in a timely fashion. And he says if people want safe communities, we need court staff, we need deputy prosecutors, we need public defenders to be able to administer justice. And Lalonde says he thinks Vermonters are going to be willing to pay more in taxes to make that happen.
Do we want to live in a state where people are feeling unsafe and they're saving money in their pocketbooks, or do we want to have a state that feels very safe and it will cost some money? There's no doubt.
Well, Pete, if lawmakers do move forward with a tax increase, do we know yet what it would look like and who would have to foot a larger portion of the bill?
House Speaker Jill Krawinski says she and her leadership team have not yet made that threshold decision about whether to raise taxes to pay for new initiatives. If they do make that decision, though, Krawinski says it won't be working-class Vermonters who will see an increase in their tax burden.
I don't want to put that burden on their backs, and so we would want to be looking to make sure that corporations and the wealthy are paying their fair share. Have we gotten to that decision point yet? No. We still have some more work to do, but that is my mission, to ensure that we're doing everything we can to help working families in our state.
So the House Committee on Ways and Means has a few bills waiting in the wings if and when lawmakers decide to move forward with a revenue package. One would increase the property transfer tax on high-value homes. One would impose new assessments on corporations that offshore their profits overseas. Another would create a 3% surcharge on income over $500,000. That bill alone would raise on the order of $100 million a year. Phil Scott thinks any of these would be a serious mistake. Between school budget increases next year and a new payroll tax that's going into effect in July to fund the child care bill that lawmakers passed last year, Vermonters are already on the hook for more than $300 million in additional tax obligations next year. Scott has made it abundantly clear that he will not abide any budget that relies on an increase in taxes or fees. And that means that if lawmakers are going to go forward with a tax increase, they're going to need to have the votes to override a veto in order to get it enacted into law.
That's Vermont Public's Peter Hirschfeld. Thanks for getting us up to speed, Pete.
Thank you, Mitch.
And you can listen to Vermont Edition this coming Monday to learn about the status of key bills moving through the legislature. And a reminder, you can sign up for our weekly Capitol Recap newsletter at vermontpublic.org. Thanks for listening to The Frequency today. Our executive producer is Kevin Trevelyan, and our music is by Blue Dot Sessions. I'm Mitch Wertlieb. Talk to you next week.
At a time when information continues to come at us faster and faster, sometimes you need to hit pause and rewind. NPR's Throughline takes you back in time to the source of the news stories filling your feed. Find NPR's Throughline wherever you get your podcasts.